When you think of modern day shooters, you tend to think of Battlefield, Call of Duty, or maybe even Overwatch. And these games are all linked by one key similarity. It's not the fact that they're all shooters, it's the fact that they rely on the games as a service model, or also known as live service, opening up many different avenues of monetization for modern day gaming. And today, that's what we're here to talk about. This is the story of live service. The year is 2017. You were in the peak of Fortnite. You've got the cube, you've got the rocket launch, and you've got the meteors. This was the point when Epic Games decided to take a new approach to gaming, and quite a creative approach, implementing what we know as modern day live service. And this level of creativity never slowed down, with them even re-releasing OG Fortnite, absolutely crushing the record for concurrent players they had set prior. Needless to say, Epic has always had something special about them when it came to live service, picking very unique ways to keep players engaged. But when it comes down to other franchises hopping on this bandwagon, it's a totally different story. You've got the likes of Call of Duty, Apex Legends, and even Battlefield that all use this model. But why is this format so popular as of late? The main purpose of this format is to keep players hooked so they keep coming back, maybe for a shop update or a big event that happened that week. It's all about retention of the gamers in the end.
Get 2 operator kills with a breacher drone. I don't even have the breacher drone unlocked. I got a new daily challenges to unlock the breacher drone to complete my daily challenges.
That's why you have certain companies like Bungie hiring behavioral specialists so they can keep people extra hooked. Not to mention the fact it allows them to trickle feed content, adding to some crazy amounts of grind, with most games including some basic microtransaction that allows you to skip that grind entirely. This format is really designed to prey on people mentally in the end. Like mentioned before though, there really was a honeymoon period when it came to games as a service, with most games doing basic live events all the way up to full-fledged concerts. This, compared to what we have to today, was definitely the peak. The problem with these type of events is that they could only hold the charm for so long. As the games went on, you could definitely start to see cracks in games as a service. After this honeymoon period, games were often having broken launches, adding hotfixes, patches, or just servers that didn't work at all on launch. This was definitely an avenue that was really allowing dev studios to push an unfinished product while still capitalizing on things monetarily. Because trust me, we all know the shop and the battle pass are going to be working on launch. So let's take a look at what games we have today and the current state of live service as a whole. First, we can start with the games that still have a decent grasp today, then slowly work our way down to the games that just decided to add a 2. Firstly, we can start with our good old Fortnite. The initial launch of Fortnite was received quite well, aside from PUBG being upset with them stealing their idea. As the game itself started to receive some traction and some future patches, this is where things like the Battle Pass would be added in, taking heavy inspiration from Dota 2's Season Pass ticketing system, which was used as a sort of substitute to loot boxes. Fortnite wasn't the first game to add something like a Battle Pass, but it definitely was the first one to make it really big. At the time, it was a new way to progress and a very fun one too, while also being a really good way to add some exclusivity to the skins. Then you had the events. Those were also really creative, but as one led to another and another, they started to get really repetitive and boring. And as Fortnite continued to gain popularity, this is when they started to move into collabs. This is a pretty normal thing nowadays, but back then it was super rare. Collabing with companies like the NFL, certain YouTubers, Marvel, NBA, Batman, Superman, Rick and Morty, and the list goes on and on. And at this point, this is where Fortnite really started to lose its charm, relying very heavily on these collabs. The list I just shared only being a very small chunk of it. With the constant events and collabs pushed together, this is where you could really start to see modern day live service start to come in, plus having to buy a new battle pass every month. This prior format is what modern day games took inspiration from. Another really good example being Apex Legends. EA being typical EA, they took this idea and copied it one for one, having their own live events, their own battle passes, and their own collection events. But that's just kind of their way to get you to spend more money.
Golfing.
Then you had games like Warzone taking the same inspiration, and you could basically call it a one-to-one copy as well. Not to mention the numerous other games that capitalized on this format at the same time. Things like Destiny 2, Battlefield, Sea of Thieves, and even Rainbow Six. As time has gone on, these formulas just get more and more tiring, not to mention the games that haven't even been released yet aren't safe, with games that are still in beta having battle passes. Plus, let's not forget to mention the amount of time it takes to finish a battle pass, let alone 10 of them. Of course, you have your items that allow you to skip some tiers and make things a little faster, but when you have people complaining that your game is a chore to play, you have something wrong. A lot of the games you play now feel like a second job at this point that you pay for instead, with companies heavily relying on the sunk cost fallacy, hoping that you get stuck so deep that you can't leave, leaving your typical gamer just angry in the end. Games as a service make a lot of money, which is why they've become so popular, but in the end, the players are the last ones to be considered. EA made $1.95 billion last year off the FIFA franchise alone, giving them zero incentive to switch away from this formula. Plus, throw on top your sold-out influencers that promote this is a good thing every year.
Brazil said Lucio! Yes! Yes! Boom!
Modern gaming today.
On the other hand, you have many other companies that take this formula and implement it as lazily as possible. Take Battlefield for example. Like mentioned in my prior video, it feels like they created a game just to monetize it, with a game launching with lackluster gameplay, half-finished maps, and just general overall lack of content. But like every other title, it had a working battle pass and a working shop on launch. And when it comes to EA forcing launches of these games, it puts a ton of crunch onto the devs. Which brings me to my next point. Most games that are structured this way tend to lack a ton of content on launch. With titles like Halo missing Forge and its co-op campaign, which were some of the most promised features of the game itself, with devs taking forever to add anything in between new patches. Sometimes with them even adding seasonal content that wasn't even close to that season anymore, leading to a game that had a player base die faster than I've ever seen before. Even still years later, this game still sits in a weird limbo. You have a very similar story with the game Overwatch 2, with them making unnecessary changes for things that people never asked for, plus canceling the very hyped PvE mode.
One of the craziest parts about all of this is the fact that on April Fools, they did a lot of ability tweaks that I was saying, hey, aren't these just Overwatch 2 talents? I guess these are like sneak peeks of talents coming. And the one thing they could do out of it was make them a literal joke.
Ending up with a game that feels the same as the prior version and just a bunch of false promises, putting this game as one of the worst rated games on Steam in history. But what happens when a live service game dies or loses all of its players? Well, that's kinda it. This has occurred many other times in history. Just take OG Warzone for example. Servers that shut down just a couple months ago, it left people pretty upset. Not to mention all the in-game items and skins you had are just now gone. This formula isn't immune to failure either, with games like Anthem, Splitgate, Evolve, and the Avengers game just to name a few. They all started with massive potential and all got eaten alive by the live service model. Games as a service is a massive cancer on the industry and is here to suck players dry of all their money and time. Honestly, the two most valuable things a person can have. Just to end up with what in the end? We all want the days back where our game stayed updated but the game itself stayed the way it was. I mean, we can all admit that COD games don't even start to get good until the very end of the life cycle. And by that point, we're already on to the next title. And it hurts to know if they just didn't trickle feed the content or didn't make it a yearly release, the game would have been good at launch. This industry is just stringing gamers along at this point and it's very exhausting. And people are really starting to notice this, with companies like Activision and Bungie really going the extra mile to capitalize on retention and FOMO. And you know when you start finding mental health resources on their website, you've got a problem. It's truly some evil corporate greed at play here to just suck some gamers dry. But unfortunately, I just really don't see this formula changing. Like mentioned before, it is way too profitable. So ultimately, is there a way to fix this model? Well, there is some hope with these recent colossal failures, hopefully showing some studios that it can be really risky launching their own live service game, and not to mention the amount of people that are starting to wake up now. Overwatch 2 and MW3 being some really recent good examples, with most of the fanboys of the game even turning on them. Hopefully with some more outcry from regular gamers, this could be a formula that would change, that could either be innovated on or just moved in an entirely different direction. Because in the end, when it comes to live service, modern gaming sucks.